reading the Wall Street Journal every day. It was like, why isn't there an Oscars for business? I talked to people I'd worked with, and they all said, you couldn't pick the worst time for doing this. And I thought, well, if they think that, there must be something to it. And I started to work on it.
If you're going to be an innovator, you got to go where it ain't so safe. Hey, if it doesn't feel safe, then it has a high impact potential.
I just couldn't work for other people anymore. I needed to do something for my own. Had made a little .com money, not a lot, but enough to let me work from home for a year and live together. And I thought, what do I want to do? What do I know how to do? I thought about buying a little publishing business. There's a lot of competition in the Zag market, right? Everybody's going there. And again, every entrepreneur, it doesn't come as quickly as you think it will. But can you adjust your expectations? Can you adjust the way that you're operating, either reserve cash or raise more cash to get you to the point where you can be successful? Who could be an entrepreneur? On one side is, and I'm on this side, anybody can start a business. Anybody with work experience and passions who's a self-educator can start a business. You don't have to conquer the world. You just need to be able to support yourself. If you can have a business that supports yourselves and your family, that is success. You hear statistics that most small businesses will go out of business within 5 years. A lot of that is due to people give up too quick.
What do you do instead of give up then?
My philosophy is our purpose on this planet is to be useful. I want to make as many contributions as I can. And if you do it right, it never feels like work. If you can find a business at the intersection of what you know and what you learn, where your passions are combined with your experience and your knowledge, and if you can make successful business with that, you're just doing what you know and what you love. It's never feels like work. It's going to be harder than you think, but the process is a privilege. It should be enjoyable to go through those challenges of starting a business and making it successful. You should always find some joy, even in the hard things in life, because it's something that if it goes away, you'll miss it. You don't know how valuable it is while you have it sometimes.
Hey, welcome to the Future of Selling podcast, where we dive into challenges, we dive into trends, we dive into innovations, really anything impacting the future of sales or the sales landscape. I'm your host, Rick Smith. I'm so appreciative that you decided to join us today. So our guest today is Michael Gallagher. So Michael is described as a serial entrepreneur, a recognition visionary, I love that, and a longtime champion of innovation. So Michael's best known for being the founder and executive chairman of the Stevie Awards. Maybe you've heard of those. We're going to talk a lot more about those today. So the Stevie Awards is the leading business awards platform. Michael has spent more than 2 decades in the Stevie Awards, spotlighting excellence in sales, customer service, marketing, leadership across 60 plus countries. And matter of fact, I was just talking to him before we started recording, and they're actually now starting a new category. So we'll probably hear a little bit about that today. I think that's amazing. However, his innovation doesn't just stop with recognition awards. Michael is also the co-founder of 2 AI-based startups. I think they're both still in startup mode, which is ImageShield and Reqsy. So we'll find out more about that from Michael as we get going here. We're really excited about the conversation today because Michael is such an innovator, and he's also just a forward thinker. He's been doing this for 22 years in working in the area of recognition. So it's pretty exciting. So Michael, welcome to the podcast, and really just thank you for your time today, sir.
Thanks for having me, Rick.
Yeah, absolutely. So I always like to get started with a couple of fun facts before we get going, just to give people maybe a little bit more background. We'll hit on a lot of different things today, but just a couple of things we looked up and found out about you. And you can confirm these are accurate or they're not. But, the name Stevie, which I always thought that was interesting. I heard about the Stevie Awards a number of years ago, but obviously now you're on the podcast, I've leaned in a little bit more to it. But the word Stevie comes from the Greek name Stephanos, meaning crowned. Is that accurate?
That is accurate. When I started the Stevie Awards, it's hard to find a name.
Yeah.
It's hard to find a name for a business or a product or service that's meaningful and that's available.
Yeah.
So when I was looking for a name, I took 2 baby naming books out of the library, a boy's book and a girl's book.
Yeah.
And I went through both books and wrote down any name that sort of resonated with me. And I wanted a name that sort of resonated with Tony, Emmy, Grammy, sort of had that like Stevie has.
Yeah.
It had to be a name that had a positive root connotation, which obviously Stevie Stephanos does.
Yeah.
And it had to be a name that I could use around the world. It couldn't be a name that was okay in the U.S., profane in some other country, right? So, I wrote down the list, and I went through the list and then checked to see what was available, and almost nothing was available. But Stevie was available. There were only 2 Stevies that I could find. One was a sports writer in Detroit gave out a Stevie Award every year, but it wasn't an award. It was just, he wrote a column, right? And And the lawyers said, well, it's not an award. That doesn't count.
Right.
And there was a monastery in Canada that gave out an award called the Stevie. And I thought, well, I don't think the Canadian monks are going to sue me. So it became Stevie. And Stevie was also my father's name, so there was another reason.
Yeah.
But
all right, so there was I wondered if there was a personal.
But that's not the primary reason. It was available, and it met all the criteria.
Yeah, it was like, oh, and also this is my father's day. This is really cool. So, all right, got it. Okay, well, good there. The other kind of cool, fun fact around the Stevie Award is that your actual award, the trophy that's handed out, is made by the same company that makes the Oscars trophy.
Well, not anymore. It was originally designed and made by R.S. Owens in Chicago. I don't know if they still make the Oscar, but at the time and for many years they did make the Oscar.
Yeah. And
when I talked with them about creating the award, they said, "How heavy do you want it to be?" And I said, "How heavy is the Oscar?" And they said 8 pounds. I said it should be 8 pounds. And it was huge. The trophy that's now our grand award is the original Stevie Award trophy. It's a monster trophy, right. And it was just it's so expensive to ship and so fragile because it has a glass piece on top.
Yeah.
It just became impractical to keep it as the everyday Stevie Award trophy. So we had a smaller one designed. And the smaller one is now the gold, silver, and bronze trophy.
Got it.
The large one, the original trophy, is the grand trophy. We don't do so many of those anymore every year. But it has become a coveted award around the world.
Yeah. No, I think it's cool. And I did read that it was 8 pounds. I was like, my goodness, that is heavy. Now that's the primary one, but you've got others that aren't as,
And counterintuitive, the bigger one is actually more fragile than the smaller one.
Yeah. Okay. Got it. So final fun fact. And again, you can tell me this is true or not, but I was kind of looking you up and you were described as a contrarian. Because when you launched the Stevie Awards, and this was the reason that title was out there, that you were encouraged by most people don't do this, right? Because it was kind of a time of a lot of stuff going on,
For younger people who don't know this, there were a lot of business scandals in the early part of the 21st century. There was WorldCom and Enron. There was a lot of stuff. They were sort of tarring the whole business community with this brush that there was a lot of corruption and greed.
Right.
And I had gotten my MBA back in 1994, and I considered myself a student of business. And I realized that, there are many millions of businesses around the world. At that time, 25 million plus in the U.S. alone, many more now probably. And as we know, most people go to work every day with the best of intentions, honorable intentions. They want to do the best work that they could do. And I thought, why should everyone who goes to an office every day or shows up for work every day be tarred with the brush for the misdeeds of these few people? And I knew how to do award shows. I had worked for 6 years in New York, where I grew up. In the 80s for a company that put on a film festival and advertising awards, lots of media awards. So I knew how to do it.
Right.
And I was in a position where I wanted to do something of my own. I thought, well, the world doesn't need any more film festivals, but why isn't there an Oscars for business? And I talked to people I knew, and they said, well, you couldn't pick a worse time to do this. And instinctively for me, when someone says you shouldn't do something, I think I probably should do that.
Yeah.
It's just the way I am. So I'm trying I just know from experience that the opportunity is to zig where everyone else is zagging, right? You don't want to be a zagger among the millions of zaggers. The opportunity is, looking where no one else is looking. And, and I did that. And we've had some copycats since then. But when we started the Stevie Awards, there were really no opportunities for managers and salespeople and engineers and financiers and customer service executives, to have an Oscar moment, to get on a stage and with a spotlight and thank their parents and their teachers, like, we've all seen actors and actresses do on award shows our entire lives.
Yeah. No, I think that's incredible. And that was kind of the statement that you were talking about. That's the one that kind of caught my attention on this fun fact, right? And I don't know if this is a direct quote or not, but hey, if it doesn't feel safe, then it has a high impact potential. And I think that's just what you're talking about, right? If everybody else is zagging, that's the safe route. But, find the route that's not quite as safe. And I think that probably also speaks to kind of your serial entrepreneurship, right? Your kind of innovator piece, right? If you're going to be an innovator, you got to go where where it ain't so safe, where not too many people are hanging.
Yeah, there's a lot of competition in the zag market, right? Everybody's going there. But one of the things I've learned, and I didn't become an entrepreneur until I was in my 40s, so I had a lot of work experience behind me.
Yeah.
And when I speak to students now, which I do a lot, traditionally I've discouraged them from starting businesses right out of school. My message to them has been, go work for somebody for a couple of years, learn an industry, learn where the opportunities are in your industry or your organization that aren't being taken. And all the mistakes you're going to make them on somebody else's dime. Learn a little bit about what the working world is like. And again, being a student of business, you hear statistics that most small businesses will go out of business within 5 years. And a lot of that is due to people starting business they probably shouldn't have started. But, from my point of view, a lot of it is that people were unrealistic about how much money they were going to need to get to break even, but also people give up too quickly, right? And one of the things I've learned, one of my startups, which you've referred to is ImageShield, which we've been working on for almost 5 years now, started during the pandemic, and we've had a couple of pivots, and we haven't given up because we know there's an opportunity there, and we know there's going to be a need. We're a little bit early. If I were in my 20s, I might have given up on it. I might have said, well, hasn't really taken off. And I just know, being an older person, it just needs more time.
Right. So what do you do instead of give up then? I mean, you hit a dead end, right? I mean, you got two options: I give up, or I do what? I mean, what do you do in place of giving up?
Well, one of the things I pride myself on, and I'm not really a self-promoter. I don't do a lot of interviews like this. I like to stay busy and productive. My philosophy is our purpose on this planet is to be useful. And I want to make as many contributions as I can. One of the things I do pride myself on is being resourceful. When I'm presented with any challenge in a business context, I'm pretty resourceful and be able to come up with a solution pretty quickly. And as I mentioned with ImageShield, we've had a couple of pivots. The current version of ImageShield, we have an app now that has recently been approved, is in the Google Play Store. And we're still waiting for Apple approval to be in the iOS store. And, we'll be marketing that. That wasn't the original vision for ImageShield. We pivoted a couple of times. We've learned. But being a student of business, and I read a lot, I know what's going on in the technology industries, and I know what's going on in the world. AI is going to unleash a tsunami of deep fakes and challenges to people's identity and the protection of their likenesses. And there's going to be more and more cause for people to use tools like ImageShield to help protect themselves against them. I saw that coming 5 years ago, and we were talking about it 5 years ago. And, I didn't understand why a lot of people didn't see that it was coming, but I knew it was coming. When a high school bully has tools available to do digital things to their classmates that they used to have to do in the schoolyard, we know people are going to have to use tools like this. So
tell us a little bit about that, though. And if you don't mind, just I was going to ask you, hey, tell me about how you started Stevie Awards and why. I think you kind of went into that, right? It was you felt like there was a gap because of everything else. There was so many kind of negative sentiments going on.
I'll take you back to my history. As I mentioned, I was in my 40s, which is not that late for starting a business, but we kind of have this vision of entrepreneurs starting in their 20s or 30s when they're young and they don't have so many commitments, maybe fewer kids, maybe, they just don't have a lot of commitments. So they have the freedom to start a business. But when people say to me, why didn't you start earlier? My response is I wasn't ready.
Right.
I did it when I was ready. And, looking back, I really did it at the right time because I had a lot of work experience behind me in industries that were valuable in being able to start the Stevie Awards. As I mentioned, I worked for a company that did media awards, so I knew how to do it. I knew how to recruit judges and issue a call for entries and organize it to have winners determined and put it on an award ceremony. I had done all that before.
Yeah.
So I was at a point, I was working in the dot-com world from the mid-90s up until the early 2000s. And I got to a point where I just couldn't do it anymore. I just couldn't work for other people anymore. I needed to do something on my own. I'd made a little dot-com money, not a lot, but enough to let me work from home for a year and put it together.
Right.
And I thought, what do I want to do? What do I know how to do? I thought about buying a little publishing business. And again, reading the Wall Street Journal every day, I was like, why isn't there an Oscars for business? I know how to do that. And I talked to people who I'd worked with, and they all said, you couldn't pick a worse time for doing this. And I thought, well, if they think that, there must be something to it. And I started to work on it, and people did respond to it, It was hard the first couple of years because any business is going to take, like every entrepreneur on the planet.
Right.
You open your door, and you think the world is going to rush to your door, and it doesn't work that way, right? So the rubber meets the road. When you realize that, can you adjust, right? I remember it was probably 2008 or so. One of the third Stevie Awards program we started was called the Stevie Awards for Women in Business, which is still, one of our programs. It's now in its 22nd year. It recognized the achievements of female entrepreneurs and business owners and executives and employees, and women-related achievements around the world.
Right.
And a woman named Nancy Knowles, who started a business in Canada with her husband called Smart Technologies. They made electronic whiteboards used at academic institutions around the world. And she gave a speech, as some of the winners who come to our events do. She got on stage And she said that her business was successful, but the revenue that she and her husband thought they would have in their first year, they didn't have to the 10th year.
Wow.
And that statement says a lot about successful entrepreneurs. That
Right.
like every entrepreneur, it doesn't come as quickly as you think it will, but
Yeah.
can you adjust your expectations? Can you adjust the way that you're operating to either
Yeah.
reserve cash or raise more cash to get you to the point where you can be successful? And
Yeah.
a lot of people give up before they get to that point because the world doesn't rush to your door as soon as
Yeah.
you open it. So,
Yeah.
what do you do then?
Yeah. Can you actually see obstacles as an opportunity, not be overcome by the
Well, you
lack
have to
of?
be resourceful enough to be able to pivot, right? So the Stevie Awards
Yeah.
wasn't as successful initially as I thought it would be. The first year was the American Business Awards, which is our
Yeah.
oldest. We just concluded our 23rd annual of that. In 2024, we started the International Business Awards, which has sort of the same categories as the American Business Awards, but it's open to all organizations worldwide.
Sure.
And we
Yeah.
started the Stevie Awards for Women in Business, and we now have 9 Stevie Awards program. But the first couple of years were hard, right? I think back on how hard I worked those first couple of years. I don't even like to think about it. It was so hard. Not that it's easy now, but one of the great things about being an entrepreneur, and I'm a real promoter of entrepreneurship. And there's 2 schools of thought about who can be an entrepreneur. On one side is, and I'm on this side, it's anybody can start a business. Anybody with work experience and passions, who's a self-educator can start a business. Right. And it doesn't have to be a Meta or a Google. You don't have to conquer the world. You just need to be able to support yourself. If you can have a business that supports yourselves and your family, that is success, right? But there's another school of thought that not everybody is suited for that. I don't believe that. And sometimes when I talk, I go off on these tangents. Now I don't remember your question. What was your question?
No, that's okay. And then we were just talking about the Stevie Awards and kind of what started it all for you, right?
Yeah.
Kind of going back to the early
So,
days.
one of the great things about being an entrepreneur, and if you do it right, it never feels like work. So, I come to the office every day. I came to the office every day during the pandemic. I was the only one coming in. We sent everybody home. Most people are still working from home because I'm just like, after the pandemic, it's like, why am I going to ask these people to fight through traffic every day? No, it works.
Yeah.
Let's just do that. It just doesn't feel like work if you can find a business at the intersection of what you know and what you love.
Yeah.
If you can find that combination where your passions are combined with your experience and your knowledge, and if you can make successful business with that, you're just doing what you know and what you love. It's never feels like work. And this doesn't feel like work for me. It's just what I do. It's very rewarding.
Yeah.
Watching people get on stage and get a big trophy and talk about how meaningful it is to them, and have people say, I went to a high school reunion recently, and somebody who knows what I did said to me, you've impacted the lives of tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people around the world. And is it about the money? I mean, most entrepreneurs, if they feel the way I feel, it's never about the money. The money follows you being good at what you do.
Yeah. I think, you use the phrase, it never feels like work. I want to kind of unpack that a little bit. And because I think there's a piece of it, and you can confirm this, you're much more of an entrepreneur than I am at this point. But it doesn't mean it's not hard. Doesn't mean it's not difficult. It doesn't mean that you don't have, those days that really kind of drag you down and you have to fight through. I don't think that's what you're saying. I think, so just unpack that just a bit and maybe.
Well, I got my undergraduate degree at Fordham University in New York City in journalism, and I got my MBA at George Mason University here in Virginia, where I've lived since 1988. And I was recently invited back at Fordham's Business School to coach student entrepreneurs. And I had a Zoom call with a couple of them, and we were talking about starting a business. And I cautioned them, it's going to be harder than you think, but the process is a privilege. Not everyone gets to start a business. Not everyone around the world is in an environment where that's even possible. Right. And as hard as it is, just enjoy the process. Is a privilege. It should be enjoyable to go through those challenges of starting a business and making it successful.
Yeah.
As hard as it is, just enjoy that process. It's something that not everyone gets the opportunity to do. Just enjoy it. And as I mentioned, it was really hard at the beginning because it was my first business, and it was just really hard the first couple of years. But I think back on it now, and as hard as it was never unenjoyable. It was always a challenge. I like challenges. You can think of it like a puzzle. If you're a person who appreciates puzzles, starting a business is a puzzle. There are pieces that are missing that you're looking for that you haven't found yet. Yeah. You're still figuring out how they fit together. You should always find some joy, even in the hard things in life, because it's something that, if it goes away, you'll miss it.
Yeah.
Right? You don't know how valuable it is while you have it sometimes.
Yeah. Is there a common thread for you that's run through, because you got at least 3 businesses we've talked about today, the Stevie Awards, ImageShield, Reqsy. Is there any kind of common thread that runs through those three for you? Or is it, well, I'll just end the question there. Is there a common thread for you that runs through those?
Well, in terms of the applications, no.
Okay.
Stevie is quite different from ImageShield, which is quite different from Reqsy. Reqsy is the common element with ImageShield is the use of AI.
Yeah.
Which we can talk about. We will be using AI with Stevie Awards soon.
Okay.
I mentioned to your producer that the timing of this conversation is good because earlier this month in July 2025, we opened the 2026 edition of our Stevie Awards for Sales and Customer Service for nominations. And,
right.
That's in its 20th year now. And it recognizes the achievements of individual sales performers and sales teams and entire sales organizations and sales-related achievements around the world. And our newest Stevie Awards program, which we started last year, was the Stevie Awards for Technology Excellence, which has lots of different categories to recognize people and organizations and teams and related achievements in technology industries. And the number of nominations, typically it takes anywhere from 3 to 5 years for a new awards program to start to catch on and start to grow.
Yeah.
We saw the nominations in the Stevie Awards for Technology Excellence double this year from last year. In the second year, it doubled from the first year, which is quite extraordinary. And looking through the nominations, we saw that a lot of these technology individuals were using ChatGPT and tools like that to write and create their nominations, which is one of the reasons that the nominations grew so quickly.
Yeah.
It was extraordinary. The formatting and the kind of content that was included in them from individuals across disparate organizations, so we knew they weren't collaborating, was quite similar. So it was clear that they were using common tools to create these things.
Yeah.
So I sat down with our CTO and I said, we need to look at this and figure out how we can capture this to be able to use it for other of our awards programs. Because obviously salespeople and customer service reps and people with other functions outside of technology are not going to be as sophisticated using tools like ChatGPT to be able to create their nominations. So we're actually starting to work now on creating an AI tool based on ChatGPT or Claude that people can use to actually create their nominations. So I don't know when we will have it available, but in the foreseeable future, we'll have a tool like that salespeople or customer service reps can use in helping them to create their nominations for the Stevie Awards for Sales and Customer Service. But that said, we recently opened again entries for our Stevie Awards for Sales and Customer Service, and we've added a whole lot of AI-related categories to that competition regarding the use of AI in customer service and sales.
Yeah. Well, let me get your kind of perspective on some of that, right? Especially as we think about, how we stand out, how salespeople, sellers, sales leaders, sales teams stand out in kind of this age of AI. So everyone in sales has access to AI tools, right? Some similar, some are more cutting edge. I mean, certainly from, the company I work for, Conquer, we've got our take on AI, and we're moving forward in a number of areas that we believe are unique. But there's also some common tools out there, like you're talking about, ChatGPT and things of that nature. So in your view, what actually separates top performers today from everyone else? I mean, you've got lots of nominations coming in. You see a lot of data, a lot of information. So if they've all got access to these tools, what stands out and separates the top from everyone else?
Well, I really can't speak to what separates great sales performers from not great. I mean, that's not what I do, right? So, and I'm not a judge. I mean, we have more than 1,000 people around the world who act as Stevie Award judges.
Yeah.
Every year. When I say I was looking at the nominations of the Stevie Awards for Technology Excellence, I was just trying to figure out why we got so many more than last year, because that growth was kind of extraordinary. So I was looking through the nominations. I saw those commonalities, and the commonalities spoke to the common use of some tools. When I presented that to our CTO, he goes, they're just using ChatGPT. Right. So what I can say in terms of the Stevie Awards, what separates highly rated nominations from non-highly rated nominations is, the feedback we get from judges is it's not enough to tell the world what you did. Just say that you increased sales some percentage over the prior year, or the client base by some certain number.
Yeah.
What the judges want to know is, what's the real world impact of that? How have you improved your own organization or your customers' organizations? Have you increased revenue? Have you increased profit? From a customer's perspective, how have you made customers' lives better? And that just goes to show that nothing we do exists in a vacuum, right? Everything we do impacts other people, whether it's within our own organizations or our customers or our communities. And being able to explain that, being able to relate what you do to the impacts it has on other people is really important in the context of an awards nomination.
Yeah.
That's where we see the success.
Yeah. I was telling you before we got on, I was listening to another podcast you were on, and one of my kind of regular podcasts I listen to. And you guys got into talking about storytelling, which kind of makes me think that's where
That's really
kind of going. Unpack your point of view on storytelling, right? Why is that so important? And not just nominations, but even in the sales process itself. Maybe you can comment on that, maybe you can't, but talk about the importance of storytelling.
All of human history is told in stories, right? If you open up a history book, it's not a PowerPoint. It's a series of stories, right? And people are storytellers. This is what we do. This is how we relate to other people. This is how we tell our own story. I mean, I've been telling you my story. I didn't hold up a bunch of bullet points to you. Storytelling is really important to illustrate the impact. Every story has several parts. It has a before condition, it has a middle condition, and it has an ending, right? And in terms of a Stevie Awards nomination, it's before condition. This is the way things work. The middle part is how we addressed the needs we saw in that first part. And then the last part is what's the outcome, right? How has it impacted my organization? How has it made my customers' lives better? How has it made my community better? And if you can structure a nomination with that story format, this is the before condition, this is how we addressed it, and this is the outcome. That's the story. And not only is it a story, it's a work of art, right?
Yeah.
We do webinars in advance of our entry deadlines for all of our programs now. And we cover this in that. And one of the benefits of going through that process is you wind up with a story you can use in other contexts. It's not just a story that's an award nomination. It's a story you can use to build your corporate brand or even your personal brand. And personal branding is really important. I want to talk a little bit about that. I mentioned that our nominations and our Stevie Awards for Technology Excellence more than doubled from last year in just the second year, which is quite extraordinary. But a high percentage of those increased nominations were individual technology performers nominating themselves.
Yeah.
Because they see the writing on the wall. They're the closest to the impact of AI. And they see the impact that AI is going to have on the workforce, especially on performers at the lower end of the food chain in the workforce. So the entry-level performers, right? And this is really going to be important for your audience, for a sales audience who are just starting in their careers, or just a couple of years into their careers.
Yeah.
A lot of organizations are going to look to automate a lot of functions in their organizations, and they're going to start at the bottom.
Right.
Chat AI predicted that within the next 5 years, 50% of all entry-level jobs will disappear. Now, will organizations be successful in automating a lot of functions? We don't know, but they are going to try.
Right.
So if you're a sales representative or someone who's just starting out in a sales career, you need to build your personal brand.
Okay.
You need to show your value to your current employer, and to any potential employers in the future. And one of the ways you can do that is through nominating yourselves in a Stevie Awards program or some other sales recognition program. Several years ago, we eliminated the entry fees for most of the sales individual categories in our Stevie Awards for sales and customer service. So right now, it doesn't cost you anything to nominate yourself. That doesn't mean you're going to get an award. That means you have an opportunity to pursue that. You have to take the time to rationalize what has been your contribution to your organization. What has been the impact you've had on your organization's customers, on your community. Think about how you're going to tell that story. Start the process of building your personal brand. So if the day comes when your position with your current employer is automated by AI, maybe they won't be successful, but they are going to try.
Right.
You need to be able to have a brand building exercise behind you that's going to help you find that next opportunity.
Yeah.
Now, as I mentioned, the individual non-executive technology performers who are out there, who are closest to the AI industry, they see this coming, which is why we saw such an explosion of nominations.
Yeah. You have like an example maybe of maybe an individual contributor, or because I think that's what you're referring to, that they submitted a nomination, they built their story, submitted a nomination, and it really transformed their career or transformed their brand. Any kind of examples you have?
We don't really follow the careers of our winners because there's just too many of them, and they're all over the world.
Yeah.
Sometimes they reach out to us and tell us about the impact they've had.
Okay.
What I can speak to is some of the people who are successful with nominations and are sort of serially successful. They nominate themselves year after year.
Yeah.
They're just good at telling the story, their story, and to building is something that an objective third party, a disinterested third party, as I say, which is what our judges are, right? Our judges are disinterested third parties. They're reading a story about someone they don't know, about an organization they don't know.
Right.
And the story is told in a way that someone who is unfamiliar with their organization or their industry can read that story or watch the video of that story, because we do allow nominees to submit videos now in many of our categories.
That's cool.
That they can understand and appreciate it. And again, that's a work of art if you can do that. We have seen non-executive sales professionals be successful at that, at telling that story in a way that someone who doesn't know anything about their industry or anything about their organization can understand that just by reading that nomination or watching the video telling of that nomination. There's a real skill to that.
Yeah.
And it's admirable when you see it, but again, we don't follow the career. Sometimes people will write to us and say, this has had a real impact on it, but it doesn't really happen that often. We're also busy dealing with the trees of we really step back and say, wow, look at that forest.
Yeah, gotcha. So really, in this, kind of go back to this idea of the pervasiveness of AI and how it's impacting everything we're doing, impacting all the industry, especially sales. So, I mean, you really see this at this awards and Stevie Awards and kind of this approach and storytelling as a way to stand out. And in this day of, hey, everybody's got a bunch of AI tools, we can all kind of sound alike in an email. But the way I have to separate myself is through recognition, through the brand I'm building, through the awards I'm getting. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah. What you don't want to do is just throw everything into AI. First of all, anything you put into ChatGPT, unless you're paying for a private mode, you're basically putting it into the public domain. So one of the things we caution entrants is, if you're a private company and you want to get ChatGPT or one of those tools to help you compose a nomination, don't put your organization's revenue figures and that sort of stuff in there, because you're basically making it public, right? So you don't want to do that. But you're right. If everyone does the same thing, every nomination is going to wind up reading the same. And we see that. We just announced yesterday the winners in this year's Stevie Awards for Technology Excellence and notified those winners on Monday. And last week we were figuring out the winners and going through a lot of them, and in some cases looking at scores and looking at the nominations. And the scores weren't as high as we thought. And I think the judges were reacting to all these nominations read the same, right?
Yeah.
Your personality is going to come out in what you write and what you say.
Yeah.
ChatGPT can help you organize facts and figures and statistics and press releases into a narrative, but only you can make it about you. Only you can add your personality to it and add your twist on your understanding of the impact it's made on your organization, your industry, your community, your customers.
Yeah. What's your point of view on this? I mean, anybody who's smart is probably going to try to use ChatGPT to improve and cut down the time on building content, right? I do work on some content myself sometimes. Do you think it's better to kind of begin the process with your own thoughts, right? I write my own draft, then drop it into ChatGPT for kind of improvements, or do I just put my very, very raw thoughts or tell Chat, hey, here's what I want, and then it punches it out, and then I try to improve it? Or do you think there's a preference?
Honestly, I think if you can write, you should write. I haven't asked ChatGPT to write anything for me. I'm old school. I can write. I know how to write. So I'm going to write. The time it would take me to ask ChatGPT to do something and organize it in the way that it could, I could probably just have written it. So I'm going to do it.
Yeah. I
mentioned we're going to build a tool for the Stevie Awards to help people prepare nominations. And it's probably going to be a tool that you can use year round, right? So year round, you're going to have press releases, you're going to have ideas, you're going to have statistics, you're going to have, earnings reports. It should be something that you can throughout the year, just throw that stuff in there, right?
Right.
And then when it comes to the time, okay, I need to prepare a nomination. You can ask the tool to look at all of that and just sort of summarize it. And I say it's got to be in 650 words because our nominations require have a word limit. It's got to be that, and focus on these things and exclude these other things. That's really what it's going to be good for, right? Is that a finished nomination? No, you still want to personalize it. You still want to make it stand out from all the other nominations. They're going to be just like that because other people are asking it to do the same thing.
Yeah, gotcha. I would think of you as an expert in the area of recognition and awards and things like that. Do you have any advice for whether it's a leader or a sales team or company that's trying to lean into kind of recognitions and awards?
Well, awards are tools. When I started the Stevie Awards, I thought, why wouldn't any company enter this? I learned quickly that, and as a student of business, I should have known this. Every organization is different. Every organization has a different culture, a different history, a different norms, a different expectations. Yeah. And, we talk to organizations and they say, we're fine nominating ourselves. We're okay with our employees nominating themselves. That's great. Yeah. And then we talk to other organizations and they go, well, we either win as one or we win as none, right? We're only going to nominate the organization as a whole. We discourage individuals from nominating themselves or individual teams. Every organization is different, but awards are tools. And like any other tool, it's only worth what you do with it, right? So if you have a hammer, you can build a house with it, or it can gather dust in a box in your garage. right?
Yeah.
So an award is a tool like that. If you win a Stevie Award, you can use it to build your personal brand. You can build your organizational brand. You can use it as a tool to attract customers, to attract employees, to attract investors, or you can bring it back to your office and put it on the shelf in the lobby and let it gather dust.
Right.
And if you're doing the latter, I don't know why you entered in the first place, but people do that, right? So, I encourage anyone who enters the Stevie Awards or any other award program to not only think about how you're going to put your nomination together and make it the best as possible, but if you win, what are you going to do with it? How are you going to merchandise that? How are you going to leverage that win?
Yeah, for your brand.
To do all those things, to show your employees that you value them. And the fact that you've nominated them in the first place is you're partly the way there. How are you going to help that to build your reputation among customers, among potential customers, among, in your community? All those things matter, right? So you have to think about that from the beginning as well.
Yeah. Have you seen any particular like creative ways? What are the most creative ways you've seen people make a submission or tell their story, whether it's Stevie Awards or other recognition programs?
That's a hard one. Again, every organization is different. We have many organizations that enter year after year. But I would say 3/4 of nominations we get every year from organizations that enter every year. Sometimes they send a lot of nominations. Sometimes they send, just a few.
Yeah.
The other 30%, 40% are from organizations that, they have a mercenary approach. We did something great this year. Let's submit an award nomination. Next year, we didn't do anything that great. We're not going to nominate ourselves.
Okay.
The ones that are sort of mercenary, they have sort of novel stories to tell. I remember there was a budget airline some years ago that did some really novel promotion, and they nominated that promotion, and they may have nominated again some years later. I think they've done it a couple of times, but a lot of entrants are like that. They just do something that's really kind of novel, and they want to nominate that. That's a hard one to answer because, again, every organization is different. We've organized the Stevie Awards in that way so that we have lots of different categories. Organizations can choose the categories for achievements that fit their achievements. We have other entrants who they just load up on as many categories as possible. And we welcome that, obviously, because our model is based on entry fees for the most part. But we have to respect the goals of every organization and why they would want to enter.
Sure. Well, good deal. Well, Michael, you're an interesting person, an individual, and you've been doing some interesting work. Let me kind of end with, and I know we're getting close to the end of our time, I always like to find out a little bit about you as an entrepreneur and you as a person and a leader for that matter. So if I can just ask you a few kind of, quick hit questions. Who's been the biggest influence on your life?
There have been so many, really. I mean, I did not come from an entrepreneurial family. My father was a blue-collar guy. My mom was a teacher, which was one of the reasons why I started the Stevie Awards was so terrifying. I had no entrepreneurial background to start. But being a student of business, I did learn pretty quickly that businesses just aren't as successful as, out of the gate. One of the things I caution students when I talk to them is, you have terrible models. You see organizations like Google or Amazon less so, but they're almost they're like singularities explode into whole universes in like a matter of seconds. And if you look at that, you think, well, if I'm not that successful that quickly, I'm not successful, and it's just not the case. It just takes a long time. So I caution them on that. I mentioned earlier that my philosophy is we're on this planet to be useful, to leave a legacy. And I think one of the best ways that anyone can do that, if they have the resources and the time and the inclination to do that, is to start a business that's going to make the world better in some small way.
Yeah.
I think the Stevie Awards makes the world better in some small way by putting a spotlight on people that normally wouldn't have a spotlight put on them. I think ImageShield is going to make the world just slightly better because it's going to help people to monitor how their likenesses are used. There's going to be more and more abuse of that. I think Reqsy, which I haven't mentioned Reqsy, but the system that we had designed and built in 2002, 2003 to run the Stevie Awards is still the system we run it on. So it's an old system. We've added a lot to it over the years, but it's coming to the end of its life. And 3 years ago, we started on the process of designing a new system. What we wanted, and we hired a software development company to build that for us. And it's been a lengthy process. It's wound up costing more than twice what was originally estimated. And we knew exactly what we wanted. We had a system that did what we needed to do. We just needed a new version, and still wound up costing twice what we originally estimated. And we just knew that the beginning of the software development process, software development life cycle, was kind of broken. And that's the process where a client, in collaboration with a software developer, develops a requirements document, figures out everything that needs to be in this system, and then translates those particular requirements into the individual software development tasks. And
Yeah.
both parts of that are broken. So this requirements gathering, we've talked to more than 30 software development companies around the country now, and they all say the same thing. Especially with smaller clients, they don't know what they want.
Yeah.
If you don't know what you want, you're going to wind up with a requirements document that's incomplete or inaccurate.
Yeah.
And then the process of translating those requirements into an actual software development description, so the developer knows what they're doing, and that's going to be a lot. And the bigger the system, the more tasks they're going to be.
Yeah.
Those aren't properly translated, you're going to wind up with software that doesn't do what you want it to do, or it's going to wind up doing something but not really what you need. So, and which is why our product is winding up costing more than twice, or a lot more than originally estimated. So we we thought there's an opportunity to fix this. We can use AI to fix that. So Reqsy.ai,
Right.
we started this year. We're starting working on building a prototype to kind of fix that front end of the software development lifecycle.
Yeah, no, I think that's
what we're working on. So again, if we can make that work, it's going to make the world a better place. It's going to bring down the cost of custom software development projects. Companies like ours won't spend as much. Projects will get done quicker, which will make it better for software developers too. They won't have to use as many resources. They'll turn around projects quicker, which means they can bring in more work. It's less likely that, and we've had, because this project is going on so long, some of the people who were working on our project on the developer end left. So we guys have new project developers, new developers. I mean, the longer a project takes, the more likely that is to happen. So it's going to be less likely to happen, or projects can get done quicker. So, again, my philosophy, I don't want to retire. I'm in a retirement age. I don't want to retire. What am I going to do? Play golf till I die? Who wants to? I'm going to work as long as I can, make the world better as many ways as I can.
Yeah. Well, let's kind of talk about, because I know I got to let you go. We're almost at the end of our time. But so if I am, let's say that I'm an individual seller, right? That's where you've spent a lot of the conversation and time around. If I'm an individual seller and I'm trying to stand out in the world of AI, what are the top, top two key takeaways or top three that you would say, you got to do this, you got to do that, you got to do the other? What do you think?
Well, there are several things that I advise everyone to do, whether in sales or anything. And that is be informed. If you don't read a lot, you need to read a lot.
Okay,
right?
Informed.
Right, and this is not a political topic, right? So people on the right may say, "Well, don't read the New York Times and the Washington Post. Read the New York Times and the Washington Post." If you don't like the editorial page, don't read the editorial.
Yeah.
People on the left say, "Well, don't read the Wall Street Journal, don't read the Financial Times. Read the Wall Street Journal and the Financial Times." I read all four every day.
Okay.
I get the Washington Post delivered on my driveway because my wife wants it, but I read them all online every day. It's important to be informed, and if you want to be informed about AI, which everyone should be, there are plenty of free newsletters you can get about AI, and they drop in your inbox every day. And read those newsletters. Be informed. AI is going to impact every industry and every profession. You need to be informed about it, and you need to use it. I mean, if you read AI news, you know that there are a lot of organizations now that are mandating that all of their employees be comfortable with AI tools. And whether your organization is mandating or not, use ChatGPT. You start using other tools. You can use the free versions just to get comfortable with them, but you need to start being familiar with these tools because they are going to impact your career. If you're more senior in your career, they're going to be less of an impact than if you're at the beginning of your career, because your organization is probably going to try to eliminate your job and automate it.
So be informed about AI for sure. Use AI and anything else.
Again, be a reader. I caution everyone, be a reader.
Yeah.
A lot of people say to me, well, I'm up on the news. Well, what do you do? Well, I watch television news. Television news is not news.
Yeah.
It's mostly opinion because opinion is cheap. Everyone has an opinion. I mean, anyone can get an opinion. Real journalism, real news, it takes time and it's expensive. So read newspapers. It's, it sounds old-fashioned fuddy-duddy, but you don't have to get them delivered to your house like it's 1970. Read them online, right?
Yeah.
And pay for good journalism where you can, right? I pay for my subscriptions because, good information ain't free.
Yeah, gotcha. Good deal. Okay, Michael. Well, hey, I appreciate the time today. Thank you so much for the conversation. Thanks for what you're doing with the Stevie Awards, and I hope your other two companies go really well.
It's been a good conversation. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, sir. Bye-bye.